Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to give you that shortcut, a clear, informed perspective on the big topics.
We've sifted through a lot on extreme heat and global climate action, really trying to get the full picture just for you.
Yeah, and today we're diving into the often contradictory world of climate challenges. It's pretty
Yeah,
complex.
definitely. We'll look at how global climate action is moving or maybe struggling amidst all these global conflicts.
And then we'll zoom in on Brazil, which is a really fascinating case study right now.
And finally, bring it right back to the immediate stuff, the heat waves. What happened recently? What might be coming your way?
We've got some great sources for this.
Yeah, really good stuff. An exclusive interview with the Brazilian president of COP30, Ambassador André Corrêa do Lago.
Plus, news reports straight from Japan dealing with that intense heat.
And, importantly, some solid medical advice on how you can stay safe when it gets dangerously hot.
Okay, so our mission here is simple. Pull out the key nuggets, connect the dots, and leave you feeling, properly informed.
With maybe some surprising facts and useful tips, too.
All right, let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
So the first thing that really hits you is how climate change just keeps marching on.
Yeah, despite everything else grabbing headlines, right? Wars, geopolitical tensions, all these other, really serious global issues.
It's like this background noise that's just getting louder and louder.
Absolutely. And that's a huge challenge for people like Ambassador Correa do Lago, who's leading the charge for COP30 in Brazil later this year.
Right. How do you keep the relevance of the theme, as he puts it?
When people, politicians, the economy,
Yeah.
they're all getting hit by more immediate things day to day.
Well, their goal, their ambition, really, is to make climate change a permanent, overarching theme.
So not just another issue on the list, but
Yeah.
a lens for looking at everything else.
Exactly. And here's something interesting he pointed out. The main fight isn't really about convincing people climate change is real anymore. He says scientific denialism, it's actually gone down quite a bit because people are feeling it. They're leaving climate change much more intensively, as he said.
Leaving it. You mean living it.
Sorry, yes, living it. My mistake. We're all experiencing the impacts much more directly now, seeing it firsthand.
Okay, that makes sense. It feels different now. So if denialism is down, what's the new big hurdle?
It's convincing people that we can actually do something meaningful, that we can slow it down or, build differently so we can live better in spite of climate change.
Right. Is action possible? Question. What's stopping that belief? Is it psychology? Practicality?
A lot of it seems to boil down to economics. He called it the biggest challenge, showing that tackling climate change through finance and economics can actually be good for the economy.
Not just a drag, but something that stimulates growth, creates jobs.
Precisely. And he insists there are loads of examples globally that prove it is possible. It's not just wishful thinking.
And that whole idea, integrating climate into the economy, we see that playing out in Brazil, right? Especially with them hosting COP30 in Belém, right there in the Amazon.
Yeah, it's a fascinating test case because Brazil's situation, its emissions profile, it's really quite different from most countries.
How so?
Well, for many nations, emissions are mostly energy, industry, transport. But for Brazil, historically, the biggest chunk came from deforestation, often illegal logging.
Wow. He mentioned it hit 50% of their total emissions at one point. That's huge.
It's massive, especially for an economy that size, one of the world's top 10.
But they are tackling it now.
Oh, yeah. Under President Lula, they've slashed deforestation by over 50% in just the last 2.5 years.
That's impressive progress.
And they've committed to ending it completely by 2030, which is, a big deal when you compare it globally. Deforestation worldwide is maybe only 10% of emissions. So Brazil's focus here is really significant.
And putting COP30 right in the Amazon,
Yeah.
that's a powerful symbol.
Absolutely. It's like saying, come see it, understand its complexity, but also we get it. We know where our main issue lies.
And the Amazon itself is seen as part of the solution too, right?
Exactly. He called it one of the great solutions to climate change. But, navigating this while managing their own economy, it's tricky. It's not simple.
Which brings us to that paradox, doesn't it? They're selling oil exploration rights. How does that fit with the COP28 agreement last year to transition away from fossil fuels? Seems like a direct conflict.
It does on the surface, but the ambassador's point is that this transition has to happen according to each country's circumstance. It's not one size fits all.
Okay.
He emphasizes Brazil's renewable energy credentials. Over 90% of their electricity is from hydro, wind, solar, bioelectricity. They built hydro dams early on, didn't have much coal.
So they're strong on renewables.
But they're also a major oil producer and exporter. That's the reality.
So it's not black and white. There's a real debate happening inside Brazil.
A huge debate, he called it. It's a democracy. They're grappling with whether they can use that oil wealth, the money from it, to actually speed up the shift to clean energy.
Using fossil fuel money to fund the green transition, that's controversial.
It is, especially for developing countries that struggle to get financing elsewhere. Oil money can be a lifeline when other doors are closed.
So does the ambassador have an answer?
He admits they don't have a perfect answer, but he frames it as a very fair debate for a democratic country to be having. It really highlights how complex these global negotiations get when you factor in national situations and development needs.
Speaking of global goals, there's the 1.5-degree target from the Paris Agreement. Scientists keep saying we're going to overshoot it. Does the COP30 president, does he still think we can get back to 1.5?
Well, he's careful to say he's not the scientist, but he consults closely with them. And based on that advice, he says there's still a possibility if we accelerate efforts massively.
A big if.
A huge if. Because it requires, in his words, everybody on board and doing the right thing, which, as he admits, is very, very difficult.
And having the U.S. central government pull out of the Paris Accord for a while must have made that everybody on board thing even harder. Paris was kind of designed to get the U.S. back in the game after Kyoto, wasn't it?
Politically, yes. The U.S. leaving had a very strong impact. It sent a powerful negative signal.
But what about practically?
Well, he also urged some relativization. Over 35 U.S. states, which make up nearly 70% of the U.S. economy, they actually kept following the Paris goals through state laws and local government actions.
So interesting. So it wasn't a complete withdrawal of U.S. effort?
Not entirely, no. A big chunk stayed the course at the subnational level.
Still, it feels like there's this underlying resistance, maybe a kind of denialism, not about the science anymore, but about whether the economic changes needed can actually be good.
Exactly. And the ambassador pointed out that within every country, the sectors that think they'll lose out from climate action, they fight the hardest to protect their interests. It's a survival issue for them, or they see it that way.
Yeah, you see those internal divisions everywhere.
It's even within governments. The environment ministry might be pushing one way, while energy, transport industry push another. He was clear. No country is doing everything right.
But you mentioned a positive shift in Brazil.
Yes, this was quite striking. He said Brazil's Ministry of the Economy is now absolutely convinced that fighting climate change is actually an amazing opportunity for Brazilian growth.
Wow, the economy ministry.
Yeah.
Not just environment.
Right. They're actively building their economic strategy around it. That's a potentially huge shift in mindset.
That really is crucial, getting the economic powerhouse ministries on board. Okay, so Brazil's navigating this complex dance. But while the diplomats talk long-term strategy, people are dealing with the heat right now. Let's shift to Japan. What happened there recently?
Yeah, it was intense. Around June 17th, 18th, temperatures shot up. Over 37 Celsius in Gifu, that's nearly 99 Fahrenheit.
Ooh.
Kyoto, Nagoya, over 36 C. Tokyo hit 34.4 C. And one city, Kofu, recorded 38.2 Celsius. That's over 100 Fahrenheit. Hottest in Japan so far this year.
And the impact, it wasn't just uncomfortable, really.
No, tragically, it was deadly. Heat stroke alerts went out in 5 prefectures. 3 deaths reported, 2 women in their 70s, 1 65-year-old woman, all thought to be heat stroke. One was working on a farm.
Oh, that's awful.
And hundreds ended up in hospitals. Just in Tokyo, 57 people on the 18th, 151 the day before, 6 were in serious condition.
It really brings it home. And the reports described everyday life, didn't they?
Yeah.
Kids playing in shadows, hot swings.
Yeah, exactly. Even at 6 p.m., things were still radiating heat.
Yeah.
Grocery stores using cardboard as makeshift heat shields.
Cardboard, wow.
And there was this one story about a takoyaki stall owner sweating buckets even with a fan and AC on inside his stall. It was still almost 34 degrees C inside, 5 degrees hotter than outside.
That just shows how pervasive it is. It gets everywhere.
It really does. And these aren't just anecdotes, right? They show how quickly extreme heat disrupts everything, even in a place like Japan that's used to hot summers. People are adapting in sometimes desperate ways.
Are authorities responding?
Yes. The government is actually making workplaces implement heat stroke countermeasures mandatory from June 2025.
That's a big step.
And companies are already acting, like Yamato Transport, the delivery company. They're giving drivers fan vests, salt candies, cold drinks, even wearable tech to monitor heat stress. Practical stuff for people who have to be out in it.
Okay, so lessons from Japan, these broader climate trends.
Yeah.
What does this mean for you listening right now? Because as we're recording this, a major heat wave is bearing down on the central Midwest and eastern U.S., starting around June 20th.
Yeah, this isn't just summer heat. This is potentially dangerous. They're calling it a heat dome.
Like a lid on a pot, trapping the hot air.
Exactly. The National Weather Service is warning about brutal humidity, triple-digit temperatures. We could even see record low temperatures being broken, meaning it's not cooling down enough overnight in the upper Midwest and Great Plains. The East Coast could see records next week.
What kind of numbers are we talking?
East of the Rockies, expect over 90 Fahrenheit widely. Denver could top 100 F. Places like Chicago, Boston, New York, Philly, D.C. could get close to 100 F.
And the feels like temperature with the humidity.
Yeah, that's where it gets really rough. Could feel like 110 Fahrenheit in the plains and Midwest and maybe the Northeast early next week.
Oof. And you mentioned vulnerability.
Yeah.
People might not be ready for this.
Right, because many areas had a relatively cool, wet pattern recently. People haven't had a chance to acclimatize. Their bodies aren't used to this level of heat yet.
And the climate change link is clear here.
Oh, absolutely. Study after study shows climate change makes heat waves more frequent, more intense, and last longer. It's loading the dice for this kind of event.
There was a quote from a doctor, Dr. Kyle Coley.
Yeah, he put it very bluntly. You can't behave the same way you normally do. You just have to adjust.
Okay, so what are the adjustments?
Yeah.
Beyond the obvious, stay inside. What about things people might overlook, like what you wear or eat and drink?
Good question. On clothing. Light layers, loose fit, wide-brimmed hat, that's standard. But cool sprays, things that help evaporative cooling, they can actually make a big difference.
And food and drink. Big no-nos, things we should be having.
Definitely avoid alcohol, sugar, and caffeine. They dehydrate you, which is the last thing you need.
Right.
Focus instead on electrolyte solutions. Coconut water is great. Homemade lemonade, herbal teas, plain water, obviously. Some people even use IV therapy for quick rehydration, though that's more extreme.
How can you tell if you're getting enough fluids?
Check your urine. You want it pale yellow or basically colorless. If it's dark, you need more fluids.
And food-wise.
Yeah.
Avoid anything specific.
Yeah, skip the heavy or greasy stuff. Cheeseburgers, fries, pizza. They make your body work harder to digest. Go for hydrating foods. Watermelon, cucumbers, strawberries, yogurt, those are all excellent.
What about activity? Yard work, exercise, playing outside?
Dr. Coley's advice again, none of that today. If it's extreme heat, just don't do it. Generally, avoid the peak hours, roughly 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., maybe even 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. when it's really bad.
And if you have to be outside, say, for work?
Take breaks. Frequent breaks, 10-15 minutes every hour in the shade or ideally air conditioning. And there's a tool, the CDC Heat Radar app. You put in your zip code and it gives you the local heat index, air quality, humidity. It's really useful.
What about people on certain medications or folks who are more vulnerable?
Crucial point. If you take diuretics, water pills, or certain heart meds like beta blockers or calcium channel blockers, you need to call your doctor. The dose might need adjusting in extreme heat.
Okay.
And definitely check in on family members or neighbors with kidney disease, diabetes, thyroid problems, or a history of stroke. They're at much higher risk.
I saw something about indoor fans that surprised me. They can actually be bad.
Yes, this is counterintuitive but important. If the indoor temperature gets above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, a fan can actually make you hotter.
Wow.
It's like a convection oven effect, just blowing that super hot air over your skin, which hinders sweat evaporation and can increase your core temperature. Fans only help cool you below 90 degrees F by aiding evaporation.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. So it's about being smart, prepared.
Exactly. But, it's not all doom and gloom.
Right. There's still a plus side to summer.
Of course. Enjoying the cooler evenings, going for walks when the heat breaks, getting that vitamin D, fresh air. It's all still there. It's just about being aware, preparing properly, and adapting so you can enjoy the season safely.
So we've covered a lot here, from the high-level global climate talks and Brazil's unique role.
Right down to the immediate dangers of heat waves in places like Japan and the U.S., and how you can protect yourself.
Hopefully you got a much fuller picture now, the challenges, some surprising strategies, and those critical safety steps.
Yeah, our goal is always to give you that shortcut to being really well-informed, connecting those different pieces to spark those aha moments.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If climate change really is this overarching permanent theme, like the ambassador said,
but global action keeps getting tangled up in short-term conflicts, economic worries, even divisions inside governments.
how might understanding all these competing pressures help you not just to cope with the immediate heat, but maybe, just maybe, to think about how we foster a more unified, effective response in the long run.
Something to mull over.